Hello, BookTube. Richard here at Calvin Wazoo. And sometimes when you're reading a book, you just have to share something right away. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to be reading a passage from this incredible book that I found in my collection, Two Old Women. This is by Velma Wallis, an Alaska legend of betrayal, courage, and survival. Very short book, and the prosaic language makes it a very easy afternoon read. And that's what I did, is I read it in an afternoon. But it's a very profound work, and it's based on an Athabascan legend of these two old women who the rest of the clan had determined, although not quite unanimously, but had determined that they were a burden on the rest of the clan and potentially threatened the clan's survival. So they were going to be left behind. And this was not an uncommon practice, but typically the people who were left behind were quite not just old, but also very feeble and unable to take care of themselves. These two women, while old and cranky, for the large part, were able to take care of themselves. But the tribe was, or the clan was, in very dire straits with winter coming on, and food supplies were scant. And so that decision was made. And despite the initial resentment both women felt, they determined that they were going to go on, that they were going to go on living, that they weren't going to just sit there in the wilderness and wait to die. And that's what this legend, this story is about. And it's passed on, it's a story that's passed on from mother to daughter, as the tradition. And so what Velma Wallis did, she heard the story from her mother, and so she wrote it down and embellished it a little bit to give it a stronger story feel, but stayed with the linear telling and of the story. And it is a very powerful story. And there are many, many lessons one can learn in reading this book. And as I say, it's an easy read. And so there's this one passage where the two women, despite the pain, there are mornings when they wake up where the body aches are so severe, it takes a tremendous effort of will for them just to stand up and start moving around. And they're trudging across Alaska near the Yukon River. It's the vicinity of the Yukon River, between the Brooks Range to the south, and then the other range, mountain range, which would be, they do have a map in here, and the Alaska Range. And much of this takes place just north of the Arctic Circle, in the vicinity of the Yukon River and Porcupine River. So this is in northeastern Alaska. But yes, they carry their belongings across the wilderness, making shelters and capturing game when they can, and making their own supplies, living off the land. And initially, it's an act of defiance back to the the tribe, to the clan, that, hey, you left us here to die, but, we're not going to die. Although they were uncertain that the tribe would ever know this. Anyway, it's enough to talk about the story, but I would recommend this, especially if you are interested in Native North American literature of the indigenous people. It's like I say, very prosaic, very easy read, but just packed with important meaning. And so in one of the camps, they are sitting together, and not, they're just being quiet, because often they sit in these moments of reverie where they are thinking back when the clan left them, and feeling bitter and angry. And they're also in pain because, they got so many aches and pains. It's just part of their daily life, but they persist. In spite of the horrors, they persist. And there's the two of them. One is named Sa, and the other is named Chidzigyak. And the two of them are sitting together and not speaking. They're just sitting in quiet. But then Chidzigyak, the older one, begins to talk about herself. And this is really the first time that she did that. The rest of the time they would talk about what they needed to do, their resentment and anger toward the people who left them behind, but they really never spoke about themselves and their past. And Chidzigyak does this with this, and so I'm going to read this passage. So bear with me. Once when I was a little girl, they left my grandmother behind. She could no longer walk and could hardly see. We were so hungry that people were staggering around, and my mother whispered that she was afraid that people would think of eating people. I had not heard of anything like this before, but my family told stories of some who had grown desperate enough to do such things. My heart filled with fear as I clung to my mother's hand. If someone looked into my eyes, I would turn my head quickly, fearing he might take notice of me and consider eating me. That is how much fear I had. I was hungry too, but somehow it didn't matter. Perhaps it was because I was so young and had my family all around me. When they talked about leaving my grandmother behind, I was horrified. I remember my father and brothers arguing with the rest of the men, but when my father came back to the shelter, I looked at his face and knew what would happen. Then I looked at my grandmother. She was blind and too deaf to hear what was going on. Chidzigyak took a deep breath before continuing with her story. When they bundled her up and put her blankets all around her, I think grandmother sensed what was happening, because as we began to leave the camp, I could hear her crying. The older woman shuddered at the memory. Later, when I grew up, I learned that my brother and father went back to end my grandmother's life, for they did not want her to suffer, and they burned her body in case anyone thought of filling their bellies with her flesh. Somehow we survived that winter, though my only real memory of that time was that it was not a happy one. I remember other times of empty stomachs, but none as bad as that one winter. Sa smiled sadly, understanding her friend's painful memories. She too remembered. When I was young, I was like a boy, she began. I was always with my brothers. I learned many things from them. Sometimes my mother would try to make me sit still and sew, or learn that which I would have to know when I became a woman. But my father and brothers always rescued me. They liked me the way I was. She smiled at her memories. Our family was different from most. My father and mother let us do almost anything. We did chores like everyone else, but after they were done, we could explore. I never played with other children, only with my brothers. I'm afraid I did not know what growing up was about because I was having so much fun. When my mother asked me if I had become a woman yet, I did not understand. I thought she meant in age, not in that way. And summer after summer, she would ask me the same question, and each time she looked more worried. I did not pay much attention to her, but as I grew tall and as mother and grew as tall, but as I grew as tall as my mother and just a little shorter than my brothers, people looked at me in a strange way. Girls younger than me were already with child and man. Yet I was still free like a child. Sa laughed heartily, as she now knew why she received all those strange looks from people then. I began to hear them laugh at me behind my back, and I became confused. In a way, I did not care what people thought about me, so I continued to hunt, fish, explore, and do what I pleased. My mother tried to make me stay home and work, but I rebelled. My brothers had taken women, and I told my mother she had plenty of help, and with that I would escape. When my mother turned to my father to discipline me, I would show up with a huge bundle of ducks, fish, or some other food, and my father would say, "Leave her alone." Then I grew older, beyond that age when women should have man and child, and everyone was talking about me. I could not understand why, for although I was not with a man and having children, I was still doing my share of the work by providing food. There were many times when I brought more food than the men. This did not please them. About this time in my life, we experienced our worst winter. It was cold like this, Sa motioned with her hand. Even babies died, and grown men began to panic, for as hard as they tried, they could not find enough animals to eat. There was an old woman in our group, whom I rarely noticed. The chief decided we had to move on in our search for food. There was a rumor that far away we would find caribou. This excited everyone. The old woman had to be carried. The chief did not want this burden. So he told everyone that we would leave her behind. No one argued, except me. My mother tried to stifle me, but I was young and unthinking. She told me that this was to be done for the sake of the whole group. She seemed like a cold, unfeeling stranger as she tried to talk me out of my protest, but I angrily brushed her off. I was shocked and furious. I felt that the people were being lazy and were not thinking clearly. It was my job to talk some sense into them, and being who I was, I spoke up for the woman whom I hardly knew existed until then. I asked the men if they thought they were no better than the wolves who would shun their old and weak. The chief was a cruel man. I had avoided him until the day I stood before him and shouted angry words at his face. I could see that he was twice as angry as I was, but I could not stop myself. Even though I knew that the chief disliked me, I argued on, not listening to him as he tried to answer my accusations. His action was wrong, and I meant to make it right. As I continued to talk, I was unaware of the shock that awakened the group from its malnourished lethargy. A fearful look fell upon the chief's face, and he put his large hand over my mouth. "All right, strange young girl," he said in a loud voice that I knew was meant to humiliate me. I could feel my chin go up farther so that he could see that I remained proud and unafraid. "You will stay with the old one," he said. I could hear my mother gasp, and my own heart sank. Yet I would not yield as I stared unblinkingly into his eyes. My family was deeply hurt, but pride and shame kept them from protesting. They did not want a daughter who would take such a stand against the strong leaders of the group. I did not think the leaders were strong. The chief acted as if I did not exist after that, and I was ignored by everyone else except my family, who begged me to apologize to the leader. But I would not give in. My pride grew with each moment the others pretended I was not there, and I continued to plead for the old woman's life. Sa broke into laughter at her impetuous youth. "What happened after that?" Chidzigzak wanted to know. Sa paused as she deeply inhaled the pain from those long-ago memories. Continuing in a subdued voice, she said, "After they left, I was not so brave. There were no animals to be found for miles around. But I was determined to show what could be done by my good intentions. So the old woman, I never did know her name, for I was too busy trying to keep us alive, and I ate mice, owls, and anything else that moved. I killed it, and we ate it. The woman died that winter. Then I was alone. Not even my pride and usual carefree ways could help me. I talked to myself all the time. Who else was there? They would think I was crazy if the people returned to find me talking to the air. At least you and I have each other," Sa told her friend, who nodded in wholehearted agreement. Then I realized the importance of being with a large group. The body needs food, but the mind needs people. When the sun finally came hot and long on the land, I explored the country. One day, as I was walking along, talking to myself as usual, someone said, "Who are you talking to?" For a moment, I thought I was hearing things. I stopped in my tracks and turned slowly to find a big, strong-looking man with his arms crossed, smiling at me in a bold manner. Many feelings ran through me at that moment. I was surprised, embarrassed, and angry all at once. "You scared me," I said, trying to cover up my real feelings, because my cheeks were burning. I knew I did not fool him, for his grin grew deeper. He asked me what I was doing out there alone, and I told him my story. I felt at that moment that I could trust him. He told me that the same thing happened to him. Only he was banished because he was foolish enough to fight over a woman who was meant for another man. We were together a long time before we became a man and woman together. I never saw my family again, and it was years later that we joined the band. Then he tried to fight with a bear and died. Foolish man, she added with a grudging admiration as a deep sadness weighed down on her face. It was the first time Chidzigyak saw her friend so sad, and she broke the silence by saying, "You were luckier than I, for when it became apparent that I was not interested in taking a man, I was forced to live with a man much older than me. I hardly knew him. It was years before we had our child. He was older than I am now when he died." Sa laughed. "The people would have chosen a man for me too, had I been with them much longer." After a momentary silence, she continued, "Now here we are, truly old. I hear our bones creaking and we are left to fend for ourselves." The women fell into silence as they struggled with their emotions. They lay on their warm beds as the cold earth trembled outside. They thought about the experiences they had shared. As they fell into an exhausted sleep, each woman felt more at home because of her new knowledge of the other and because each had survived hard times before. Kind of a long passage, but I really felt that was such a beautiful and important, many-layered passage. And I hope you enjoyed that too. Hey, leave your comments in the down under. I enjoy getting them. Hit the like button, please. It helps with distribution of the content, even if you are already subscribed. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. You can find me on Instagram as NewsDude76. That's NEWZDUDE76. And I hope to see you again. Yes, I do have a Facebook page called Calvin Wazoo that is focused primarily on my content that I create regarding record collecting and music, and also other articles and videos that I may find on the subject. So there you have it, a reading from my latest book that I read, Two Old Women by Velma Wallis. Please remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.